but it was 100% elimination of the internal combustion engine. It was plain black and white. And I just remember because I, at the time when I was with my previous job, I did a lot of work in California, and so I was aware of it, but I was just kind of like, I was probably like most Americans, like, oh, like, whatever, The reason why this mattered, because again, it wasn't just a California thing, is that there were actually at the time 18 states that followed California Air Resources Board, which is called CARB. So under the Federal Clean Air Act, California was allowed basically the ability to write stricter regulations because they had unique geographies where they are. But then also they had already put their own emissions plans in place before the federal legislation had been written back 60s, 70s. So, but there's a mechanism. They have to get waivers. They have to go to the EPA and get waivers. They can't just sort of do whatever they want to do. But anyways, there's 18 states that since then have chosen to follow CARB in California. So it was no longer just a California thing. It was now 40% of the American population was going to be impacted by what California was doing.
Howdy, everyone, and welcome back to Moment of Truth, the podcast of American Moment. My name is Nick Solheim. I'm the CEO of American Moment, and I'm very glad to have you back with us for another fantastic episode this week. This week, we had the privilege of having the great Karen Bailey-Chapman from the Specialty Equipment Manufacturers Association on the podcast about re-industrialization, what President Trump's EO about tiny little Japanese trucks means, and a whole host of other issues related to, vehicle and aftermarket car part manufacturing looks like in America today. It's another one of these extremely niche episodes, but I'm a car guy. I love car stuff. I know a lot of you guys are car guys too. So I think you will get a lot of enjoyment out of it. So without further ado, we will go now to Karen Bailey-Chapman. Karen, thanks so much for coming on Moment of Truth.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm very interested to hear the story of how you ended up doing what you're doing now. We first met in Las Vegas last year at the SEMA Show, which we're gonna talk about later. It was really obvious to me then when we were having conversations that you know a lot about what's going on here in DC and specifically on some of the niche issues we're going to be talking about today. But how did you end up wrapped up in all of this?
And I like the fact that you clarified we met in Las Vegas at the SEMA Show.
Yes.
Not just we met in Las Vegas.
In Vegas. I was just gambling.
That's always like, hold on, context here.
I'd actually never been to Vegas before. So
okay, well, we're glad you gave your inaugural your inaugural time there. It's so I started as an intern in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill, a former congressman named Roscoe Bartlett. He was on the Armed Services Committee at the time, and through my alumni network at school, that's how I ended up doing my summer in Washington. And I basically was hooked. I wasn't actually born in the U.S. I was born in Canada, but came to school here. So to have the opportunity to do that was really kind of neat.
Where were you born in Canada?
In Niagara.
Okay.
Small waterfall. May have heard of it. Yeah.
I'm from Minnesota, which all my friends call Diet Canada.
Diet Canada. I've never heard that. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
We used to go up to Winnipeg all the time.
I'm sorry.
And then, and then I had an uncle that lived in PEI for a decade, which rocked. Yeah. I love going to PEI.
I'm an Anne of Green Gables fan growing up because every girl in Canada is an Anne of Green Gables fan. But I've actually never made the trek to PEI. I'm trying to find an excuse to get up there.
Vacation.
Yeah, but it's summertime. Summertime on the East Coast is pretty precious, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
So I came to school here, grew up in Niagara, came to school down in the States and did my internship and then ultimately ended up back in Washington. Started unsuccessfully as a fundraiser for a public interest law firm, which they do amazing work in the right of center world, but I am not a fundraiser. So I learned that pretty quickly, but had a great opportunity with Grover Norquist at Americans for Tax Reform. And they had just created a state coalitions manager job. And they said, well, are you willing just to go around and travel around the country helping start up and foster the center right meetings, Grover's Wednesday meetings here in Washington, but across the country. And I was like, sure, I don't know anybody, but why not? And so I spent a couple of years doing that and then made the leap to what I sort of refer to as to corporate America. And then spent 4 years at DCI Group. And my job there was actually starting up the practice of strategic alliances because of all the work I had done throughout the country with different coalition groups and all the different right of center free market organizations. There was a lot of intersection between those organizations and policies. Obviously, our clients worked on in a variety of areas. So I did that for 4 years, then got offered a job with a casino company, which took me out of Washington for almost a decade because I had to relocate up to Pennsylvania. And so I spent
A casino company in Pennsylvania?
I know, right? It's
interesting.
It's actually now I think they're the largest in terms of number of sort of properties under operation, but it was Penn National Gaming at the time, now called Penn Entertainment. Anybody that's a Barstool fan would know the name. In terms of knowing a casino company, that's not, one of the Las Vegas Strip casino companies. So spent almost a decade up there and running around the country, basically expanding gambling opportunities and creating the casino, building out the casino industry in places like Ohio and Maine and West Virginia and Maryland and Kansas and so forth. But that was an amazing run, had a great time, but I wanted to come back to Washington. And I was like, okay, the longer I'm away, the more it's harder for me to maintain my relationships. And also at the time, because we didn't have sports betting at the time, or at least not the way it exists today, or online gambling, there wasn't a huge nexus to Washington when I was in that role. So came back and then went to American Beverage Association, fighting soda taxes. That was why I was brought on. They had a bit of a rough 2016. So I came in as their political person to sort of help shift how we deal with those challenges. And then now at Specialty Equipment Market Association, which is known as SEMA, best known for the SEMA Show in Las Vegas. And, happy to talk more. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about what SEMA is, but I'm a car enthusiast. That's what I like to do. I'm a very outdoors kind of person. And my husband and I own 4 Jeeps as well as ATVs. So when I got called about this position, it was like, wow, this is one of those rare moments in Washington where you get to do your personal passion as your profession, which is really rare.
The real question here is, are you Wrangler people or Cherokee people? Or what's the...
Okay, we're going to have to cut this out if any of our off-road people are going to hear this. I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. We're Wrangler people.
Okay.
Yes. And it's
fine.
We have a suite of different builds for different purposes.
I have this great picture on my phone. I can send it to you later. I drove for 9 months. I bought a 1997 forest green Jeep Wrangler with the cloth top, and it had the 36-inch tires on it. Yep. I bought it that way. But I've got this great picture of my phone where the first time we did an event with Jeff Sessions, he took all of our fellows out to dinner. I've got him, he's got like his sport coat slung over his shoulder, and he's grabbing the top bar to haul himself into the into the Jeep. It's like great one of shot. My most prime best pictures that I have on my phone. Yep. So Wrangler people can be forgiven. That's fine. Where did that love of cars originally come from, though?
So where I grew up in Niagara and in Canada, it's a GM town. So pretty much almost all of my dad's side of the family all worked for either General Motors or a paper plant, at least as, coming up in the 80s. And so even though my parents weren't car people necessarily, although they always bought cars that always had a little oomph, like they were pretty proud when they bought a Volvo with turbo engine in the mid 80s. Like I have one of those. That was pretty cool. That was pretty, cutting edge at the time. So anyway, so there's always been a thing about cars, but I grew up in a car town. I remember spending time at my friend Jenny's house, and her dad had a Triumph, like one of the kit car Triumphs, and had an MG as well, same kit car. So built them himself, and it was just, I don't know, I was just always fascinated. And so yeah, I think it's just I've always liked cars, and I like the off-road part of it just because it's a little different, racing, especially racing. Well, anything in cars is kind of kind of pricey to get into, but I like the off-road part of it because I like the challenges of rock climbing and, scaring myself half to death. But I like speed.
Totally normal.
I like speed too. I have
Yeah.
raced. I do have a race car, or not a race car. I have a sports car that I have raced. So, I don't mind speed either.
Okay. What's the sports car? Now I got to know.
It's a Jaguar F-Type Roadster.
That is
Yeah.
very cool.
450 horsepour.
Supercharged. I really like the old beaters has kind of been my thing. So me and one of my neighbors, who's my best friend, we bought, this was 3 or 4 years ago, we bought matching Volvo 240s.
Oh,
so
okay. All right.
mine is a 1990, and it's the deluxe model that has the turbo in it. It's black. And then my neighbor bought a 5-speed manual in bright red. He got his in perfect. I wanted the manual, but he was the one that could afford it.
Right.
So,
okay. All right. Fair enough.
And his was in
enough.
better condition. I bought mine for $1,000 off another neighbor, and it had been sitting in his driveway for 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
And all you had to do was charge up the batteries, start it right up. I was like, this rocks.
This is awesome.
This is awesome.
Yeah.
So anyway, enough getting sidetracked on that. What is SEMA and why should people care about it?
All right. So SEMA is the Specialty Equipment Market Association. Okay. What is that really long trade association sounding name? But essentially what we are is everything you want to do to your vehicle after you've purchased it. And depending on your perspective, it's everything you want to do, but not everything, not stuff that you have to do. So, you've got sort of the repair and replace kind of side of the industry, which is also referred to as the aftermarket. That's when, your headlight goes out or you have to replace your battery and all of those kinds of components. We're everything you do to make your vehicle better. So whether that's from an engine performance perspective, so you want to make it faster, more powerful, louder in some cases, to things like the off-road where you're lifting, you're doing suspension kits, larger tires, larger wheels, and then everything to also accessories. So when you buy a truck, say, you go and get yourself a new GMC truck, you want to put a bed liner on it or a bed cover on it. That's also something that we do. So we have both sort of application, both from a performance and aesthetics perspective, but also from a practical perspective. So you will see a lot of our types of stuff on construction vehicles, on military vehicles, on, trades like plumbing and electricians and all of that kind of stuff. So all those racks and compartments that they utilize to be able to do their daily job, because a lot of those people work out of their trucks. A lot of that kind of stuff also comes from our industry, but we're most known for sort of the fun part of the industry.
Yeah. Which part of the industry is actually the largest? Is it the bed liners or adding the racks, or is it suspension, engine performance?
So I think from just a segmentation in terms of the types of vehicles. So our truck, the truck side, truck and SUV is the fastest growing part of the industry in terms of new car sales, but also the most accessorized out of the vehicles. But it actually really depends from company to company as to whether sort of, if you will, the performance side is bigger than, say, some of their more practical products. I was just at a member company's factory about 3 weeks ago, and they're known for performance and they're known for off-road racing and they're known for these pieces, but their biggest segment of their business is actually building catalytic converters. So everyone knows them for performance, but it's actually a pretty small part compared to what their functionalities, and they're also getting into things like suspension and brakes and some other pieces of the business. So it really depends on the company as to whether, which side of the coin is bigger for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of bed liners. Had those in some of the trucks I've driven, and then I just put 6 months ago. We drive a 2006 Toyota Sequoia.
Okay.
Put the bronze rims on it.
Yeah. Oh, nice. That looks
cool.
That looks pretty cool.
It doesn't do anything for performance. My wife thinks I'm ridiculous, but I thought it was awesome. One of the first conversations that you and I had when we were out in Las Vegas was about some of this EV mandate stuff. In fact, you gave me this challenge coin. I'll hold it up to the camera over there. Maybe we can zoom in. It says death to EV mandates, FAFO, right there. Why don't we start with what was the EV mandate? We were talking about this before the episode. That was the marketing term that everybody used. But
exactly.
I think even a lot of people here in DC didn't understand what that meant.
Right.
So let's start there, and then we can talk about how you guys defeated it.
Sure. So it really started in 2021 when California signed what is called ACC2, Advanced Clean Cars 2. And it was an expansion of their emissions controls on automobiles. But what was unique, because there was an ACC1 or ACC, and everyone kind of like, oh, that's okay, that's fine. Nobody really paid a lot of mind to it. But when ACC2 was passed, it literally wrote in the legislation or in the regulation, 100% elimination. Actually, now I'm paraphrasing, but it was 100% elimination of the internal combustion engine. It was plain black and white. And I just remember because I, at the time when I was with my previous job, I did a lot of work in California, and so I was aware of it. But I was just kind of like, I was probably like most Americans, like, oh, like, whatever, that
they're doing that crazy stuff again.
There's just this crazy California again, and I didn't think too much about it. But then when I came into SEMA and I started, sort of looked at it in a different way, the reason why this mattered, because again, it wasn't just a California thing, is that there were actually at the time 18 states that followed California Air Resources Board, which is called CARB. So under the Federal Clean Air Act, California was allowed basically the ability to write stricter regulations because they had unique geographies where they are. But then also they had already put their own emissions plans in place before the federal legislation had been written back 60s, 70s. So, but there's a mechanism. They have to get waivers. They have to go to the EPA and get waivers. They can't just sort of do whatever they want to do. But anyways, there's 18 states that since then have chosen to follow CARB and California. So it was no longer just a California thing. It was now 40% of the American population was going to be impacted by what California was doing. And each of those states did different adaptations. They had different regulations and laws of how they evaluated California's, changes in emissions policies. But in the case of Virginia, under Governor Northam, they had adopted a complete blanket acceptance. Anytime California changed their emissions, it automatically applied in Virginia. So no additional vote by the legislature, no review by a regulatory body, nothing. It just like that. So anyway, so it was like, okay, we kind of looked at it. It was like, this is kind of problematic because it affects 40% of the American population. I bet you 100% of the American population doesn't know that. and at the time, we were coming on the Virginia state elections. This was in 2023. And we're like, I wonder if Virginia voters know what's going on. Because we actually tried to pass legislation in Virginia to repeal their attachment to California. And of course, at the time, the Democrats were in power. And so they just killed it, even though obviously the governor was in support of what we were trying to do. And so we actually went into the 2023 election cycle, sort of, if you will, testing whether voters knew about this and testing how did they feel about the fact that they were attached to California and they could no longer get like an ICE Jeep Wrangler, for instance, because Stellantis had to comply with California and Virginia laws now. So anyway, so we also then did an internal analysis of, okay, really what kind of impact is this going to have on our industry? And, there's a big portion of our industry that's based on the combustion engine. So anything that touches the engine and performance wise will be impacted, because if those parts go away, then that part of the industry goes away. And what we found is that 33% of our industry would be wiped out. Put that in perspective, we have a $337 billion economic impact to the U.S. economy. That's billion with a B. We employ 1.3 million Americans. So that's 330,000 jobs that could be wiped out at minimum, and over $100 billion in economic impact to the U.S. economy if California was allowed to continue. So that was sort of our reason for getting involved. Of course, the feds, under the Biden administration, they went and did a similar federal program, although they didn't do 100% ban. They didn't write those words. But the fact is that with California already affecting 40% of the population, plus the overlay of the federal EV mandate, or as I like to call it, the internal combustion engine ban, essentially the choice of technology for consumers was going to be set by government, regardless of whether, people always argue like, oh, it was only 80%. I'm like, well, when 80% of the fleet of the vehicle fleet in America can't be an internal combustion engine, then it's going to be pretty much 100% is going to be.
So to put a finer point on it, the law in California was going to be that you could just not purchase a vehicle that had an internal combustion engine in California. And there were how many states did you say had
at the time 18? Governor Youngkin actually removed Virginia from that list, so it went down to 17.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the economic impact for that, if you live in a state like West Virginia or Mississippi or whatever, is a lot of the car companies in the United States, if they're not able to sell those cars in 18 states, they're just not going to make them.
Right. Exactly. Right? I mean, you saw that whole shift, and you see all of the automakers right now having to revert back to their ICE assembly lines because they had done almost a full shift to EVs, and now that's shut down and reverting back to what consumers actually want.
Like Ford killed the Ford Lightning, right?
Yep.
Which is, I believe, basically only has a market in Northern Virginia. That's the only place that I ever
You should go check it. You see them around Aspen in California.
Okay, sure. Never been to Aspen. I'm
Neither
sure.
have I, so I've been told.
I'm sure you find them in like Sun Valley in Idaho too. But like
exactly
places that I don't spend a lot of time.
Right.
But I do spend a lot of time on 267, and that's
Yes.
where I always see them.
Exactly.
It's always those Northern Virginia commuters. And that's one thing, like, it's fine if you want to have an electric car. I know it sounds like I have 8 cars. We have 3, but I have one. I bought a Tesla last year, and it's great, especially if you live in West Virginia for like commuting.
Yep.
It's awesome. But I also I like to hear the engine sound.
Yes.
So I like having a real car too.
Yeah. Well, and again, that's the thing is, some people try to position SEMA as anti-EV, and that's not the case. We love anything on wheels, and especially, the more we can modify and improve upon it, the more we love it. But, electric cars are certainly part of our community as well.
Yeah.
It's just the fact that government shouldn't be telling us which technology is going to be available for us to utilize, because we're a really big country with really vast different needs. And as somebody like myself, I actually drive probably less than anybody in Northern Virginia, even though I live in West Virginia, because I come into the city, I park, I stay here during the week, and then I go home and I take metro, I walk, I scoot, I whatever.
Yeah.
And so just because I have an ICE engine doesn't mean I actually have a higher carbon footprint, because I use my vehicle differently. And when I do use my vehicles, it's usually for long drives, and it's usually long drives to like Charleston, West Virginia, or I had to do a last minute, my flight was getting canceled. I had to be in Cleveland for an event one weekend. So I just turned my vehicle around. I had a full tank of gas, and off I went. And the route that I had to take, there was no way I could have charged an EV, because I was going literally through the mountains of West Virginia, up through Pittsburgh, and then up into Ohio. And so I wouldn't have had that freedom without the fact that I had a gas, and I knew I was going to, and it's actually my diesel vehicle. I knew I was going to find diesel along the way, and I was going to be able to get from point A to point B. So every consumer, and that's just me, every consumer has a different need for why they use their vehicles.
Yeah. And some people just like it. Like my big thing with cars, I can still remember to this day, the moment I got really into them was my dad, he was driving, it's like a 95 or 96 Chevy Silverado, and somebody rear-ended him and the muffler fell off, and then he drove it without I'm pretty sure this is illegal in Minnesota now, but he drove it without a muffler for like 6 months. And there was something about that sound where it just like tickled something in your brain. Where you're like, I'm like a 10-year-old boy, and I'm really into cars now. This is my This is my thing. Do you guys, we didn't talk about this before, but do you guys have anything to do or what your thoughts are on, and I haven't done a lot of research on this, so I don't know a ton, but the president had this new executive order about like the K trucks and the smaller tell us about that, because I feel like I have a couple guys who are really into that, and we've talked about it some, but most people aren't aware of like what's going on.
Yep. So the president went and did an executive order to reallow K cars, K trucks, and it's KEI for those that are looking it up. So they're basically these smaller Japanese designed trucks. And I've been to Japan a couple of times. You see them all over the place. They're these like sort of compact trucks. And it's perfect for places like Tokyo. And there is.
I'm actually buying one this weekend.
Are you
by the
really?
way,
That's so funny.
This is why I'm asking.
It's my husband's new obsession. Actually,
Really?
He's like, I love those things, and I'm like,
so I've got a dealer that is like 50 minutes from where you and I. I'll get your husband linked up.
Okay. All right. I don't need him to spend more money. Actually, I'm not. I'm usually the one that's doing that on vehicles. But so basically it's allowing a pathway for folks to be able to have these vehicles here in the US. Generally speaking, I mean, there's different rules as it relates to safety standards and American safety standards, some to emissions, but it's more on the safety side that we haven't had the ability to have them in our marketplace since probably the 90s. So like anybody that's a Suzuki fan, like Suzuki Samurai and the Suzuki.
Is it the Carry?
There's a Jimny.
Jimny, that's what it is.
And because actually a friend of mine that worked for Ford just bought a Jimny. And so, when I was going to college, that was the kind of, I thought those were super cool.
Yeah.
They don't pass safety standards in the US now. So you really don't see them in the marketplace. So there's a way that they can be imported pre whatever.
It's
year.
20 years.
Yeah.
I think they have to be 20 years old.
Yeah, but people tend to still have problems importing them. Then there's some states that have tried to outlaw them. So like Maine and Massachusetts, or really reduce really constrain the regulations around them.
Yeah.
And the fact is that it's a pretty small segment of the enthusiast community, but they're very passionate about their K trucks.
Oh yeah. I'm in like 6 Facebook groups about this
right
now.
God,
like
so
I'm getting really in the weeds on this.
Yeah.
And there's even a Facebook group for people that do it in West Virginia specifically.
Okay. All right.
And the laws are really weird. So it's like you can drive it, but not further than 30 miles from your domicile. And you can drive on highways, but not any highway that was built using federal funds.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
It's like an extremely, and I'm sort of thinking like, there's no way a cop's going to know this.
I would probably take the risk on that one. Not that I'm encouraging, bad behavior. Right.
Yeah. This is totally hypothetical.
Yeah. Totally hypothetical.
But the question that I've been, because a bunch of my friends know that I've been, looking at this, and they always bring up the executive order and they say like, so what is the plan? Are we going to start manufacturing similar vehicles here? Does it just make it easier to import them? Like what's the nuts and bolts of the actual?
It's probably a little bit of both. It's just, I mean, look, the president overall has just been doing a lot of deregulation in the space, particularly on the emissions side. Also on sort of trying to lighten up a little bit on the enforcement side, which has been an issue for our industry. So basically he's trying to create pathways for manufacturing and pathways for consumer options. And so I think this is just one of those ways to continue to open up those pathways, because it is something that's really important to our industry that we work on. One of the things that we're working with the EPA on right now is, it's one thing to say for a president to say, we're not going to enforce, or we're going to choose compliance over enforcement, which is a great way to do that. But policies change with a president. And so what we want to do is to be able to create regulatory certainty for our manufacturers. So if they do start making parts for K trucks, or they start making emissions products for, everyday vehicles that want to be modified, we also want to have that certainty long-term. So that when a White House changes, and hopefully it won't, change party hands in a few years, just because we're on a good regulatory track right now.
Yeah.
But assuming it does, because that's what's been happening, we want to have some longevity in the ultimate policy of what our manufacturers, because we don't design for today. We don't design for tomorrow. We design for the next 3 to 5 years, basically on, OEs are building 2029, 2030 vehicles right now, or they're designing them. Our market follows that. So we're not designing for tomorrow. We're designing for the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. Well, and I think in that sense, it's going to be hard for some of these manufacturers. Like I'm thinking of like Ford and Hummer in particular, who have gone really into the EV space. Like I think it's going to take a while for them to start to turn some of that stuff around?
It's going to take a while, but I think it's actually been really helpful to our industry because we never shut our lines down.
Right.
And so I know there's a number of our members who have taken up, if you will, taken up some of the slack of when the DOE shut down their lines. They are looking to our membership to help fill those gaps while they get their systems restarted. So, for every downside of one action, it can actually be helpful to the other side, which it in some cases has been helpful to our industry.
Oh, that's interesting. Coming back to the EV mandate stuff, I think this is a really important point and applies to a lot of other industries aside from yours, is whether or not a single state should be able to so heavily, like their regulations so heavily impact the consumer choices for everybody.
Right.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think wholeheartedly one state should not be deciding for the rest of us. And I kind of half jokingly, but in seriousness, sort of the bad ideas kind of start in the EU, then they go to California, and then they come to the rest of the country. And that, and quite frankly, what we've been dealing with, even on emissions policy, whether you're dealing with EV mandates or any other industries that are affected by, the environmental policies, is the strategy of the environmentalists or those that are pushing sort of, if you will, the anti-manufacturing, stuff that's contrary to the manufacturing community. It's kind of like, if we get enough people, if we get enough states signed on, then the feds have no choice,
right,
than to just accept it, right? And that's, quite frankly, when I delved into the California and the whole CARB state situation with the 18 states, I was like, they've been building this for 30 years, actually probably longer. And so it was kind of like, oh, we've got 40% of the population. The feds might as well just follow what we did. And you can see that. I've worked obviously in a few different industries. That's the playbook is, oh, well, if you get enough states to adopt this, insert whatever policy, then the feds have no choice.
Yeah.
And so really our program and our advocacy program as it relates to the EV mandates actually countered that. So what we did is we actually went into states that were not CARB states and proactively passed legislation to say state government can never decide vehicle technology. They can't ban one over another. And it was technology neutral. So we didn't ban EVs in those states. We just said the government cannot decide which technology consumers must have. And so we were able to, I think by the end of our campaign, I think we passed it in about 9 or 10 states, maybe a little bit more than that. So it was a quick counter to what had been building for over 30 years on the California policy on emissions, and countered that. And quite frankly, I think demonstrated to lawmakers and people running for office that this issue actually matters and that this is really bad policy and that the federal government should not be following what California has started and in fact should listen to the American consumers. Yeah,
I was in a meeting last week with a couple of Europeans, and one of the topics that came up was some of the bad EU regulation that you were talking about. And they do the same playbook. Like they hope that if we as the EU, do this thing, we will, because we have, 440 million people or whatever in Europe, we'll force that same thing on the Americans. Like the Americans will have to do something. They will have to take Elon's Twitter keys away or like whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
And my counterpoint to them was like, but everybody hates what you're doing. Like every time I have to visit an international website and like click through that GDPR stuff, I'm like, this is the worst thing ever. And they admitted, they were like, yeah, we hate it too. And I'm like, then you don't know what you're talking about. like why should anybody listen to you? And I think the same thing about like most California regulations about just about anything, not the car market. It's like normal people do not like that stuff. Like they just want to be able to make their own choices.
Well, I mean, I just like to expand on that. So even beyond the EV policies out of California or the vehicle policies out of California, I mean, who hasn't seen a Prop 65 sticker on everything that you buy, right? And I go to the Asian market, I shop a lot at Japanese and Asian markets, and my food has Prop 65 warnings on it. And I'm like, okay, this is getting ridiculous. And I think it's...
Which one is Prop 65? I always see the little... I can picture the sticker, but I don't know what it means.
Known chemical to cause cancer. And sorry, I shouldn't be doing it in air quotes because, I mean, there's legitimate stuff that, can cause cancer, but when you go and rent and I rent vehicles in California a lot because our headquarters is in California. And on my rental car company, there's always a pop-up that comes up on the screen with a Prop 65 is that, the vehicle you're renting is known to have chemicals in it that cause cancer. I'm like, well, I'm not sucking on the upholstery. I mean, I promise I won't do that. And I won't suck in the exhaust in the tailpipe.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things I could avoid, that are not in direct contact, but it's, I think, we're laughing about it, but the fact is, I think it's become so ubiquitous across everything that I think now it's actually kind of people are immune to it.
Yeah. Nobody knows, like, I'm a policy wonk nerd and I don't even know like what it is because I just see it and I'm like,
and then they just change the label sizes and the label requirements. And so like all of like our manufacturers that have to put it on, screws and bolts now have to get new labels printed up to then, now put it on their products. And they now become subject to litigation because enterprising trial attorneys are like, oh, we found your part without the right label. And it's like, that was an old label that was part of inventory that, was sitting on some shop, some hardware store or something, auto body shop somewhere. And it's what it is. So it's just, it's honestly, in some cases, it's become sort of this boon for trial attorneys, enterprising trial attorneys that just go and look for these cases.
Yeah. You use Times New Roman in 11 and not 12.
Exactly.
We're going to take you to court.
Exactly. So, personally, let's just put labels, don't suck on this bolt. And I think we accomplish it.
Or like trust the people who have common sense to not like be putting bolts in their mouth.
Right. Exactly.
Maybe that's asking too much.
I don't know.
But so we did this great episode a couple weeks ago with Kevin O'Reilly about the right to repair stuff, who I met at SEMA, and we mainly focused on the right to repair within the context of the military.
Right.
And it was great. I mean, I got so many texts about that episode, and I think people are going to be really excited about this one too. But looking into a lot of y'all's materials, you draw out this other distinction about right to modify, not just repair. Can you kind of talk about the difference between those two?
Yeah. So we've generally been part of the Right to Repair Coalition that predated me. And, when I came on board, I kind of looked at the policy and looked at the language and, well, it's good because there's a lot of our industry that's also part of, the repair and replace side of the aftermarket. Just like any other business, our businesses like to diversify, so they have, they can manage through different economic swings and whatnot and have sort of more steady streams. But the thing that it didn't do is protect the right to modify. So it protects the repair and replace side of the segment, but not the option to, not the sort of the specialty aftermarket of modification. And sort of why does that matter? And the reason why it matters and why we have a distinction in the legislation that we're pushing is because in today's new cars are tomorrow's used cars. So when people say, I never buy new, well, if I drive it off lot tomorrow, it's now used.
Yeah.
So anyways, but in today's cars, we have what's called these advanced driver safety systems, which is known as ADAS. And so this is everything that your car beeps and yells at you. So when you're getting too close to the line,
I hate that.
When your backup camera beeps at you. The first regulation that's come in as a mandate in these systems is actually forward collision avoidance, automatic emergency braking, which is currently on the books that has to be standard in new cars starting model year 29. And so that's, basically if you're on a road and somebody stops in front of you, it's to make sure you don't, slam into them, which obviously we all like safety systems. However, when you modify the vehicle, all those cameras and sensors that are using or, basically activating these systems, it can change. So again, I'm a Jeep person. What's the first thing I modify when I get a Jeep? My bumpers. I put heavy steel bumpers on. Well, if there's sensors or cameras in the OE version of it, we need to make sure that when I replace that bumper, that those systems are actually still operating properly. Because you can just knock a camera not really hard and it can be out of calibration. If you lift the vehicle, all of a sudden the angles of which they're looking at the lane departure and so forth can change. if you wrap a vehicle, so everybody, all those people, those small businesses out there that wrap their trucks, wrap their cars with their, business information, that reflection can impact those sensors and those cameras. If you put a bike rack on the back of your car and it covers your rear view camera, in some cars you can't move, you can't back up because it's blocked, and so it thinks something's there, which it is, but it's not a hazard. You put it there. And so we're at a point now in vehicle technology that protecting the right to modify is going to be really important. And that's to make sure that aftermarket parts have the ability to talk to the OE systems so that everybody can that we can calibrate. And we know, we kind of identify the box in which we can modify sort of, if you will, safely. And also to ensure that we have the ability to calibrate those systems so that we get a thumbs up or a thumbs down that those systems are actually working as they're supposed to.
So right now, for most vehicles that have this kind of technology, can you do that? Can you not?
It depends.
Hit or miss.
It's hit or miss. I think a lot of people don't know about it. They don't think about it because they just take their car to the, especially if it's a brand new car, you're probably under warranty or you have some kind of deal with the dealership and they kind of take care of it that way. But that really does limit, obviously independent builders and people that do modifications. They're not at the dealerships necessarily. So really what we're trying to do is get out and get out ahead of regulation with an industry solution. Because in the case of the automatic emergency braking is that there is no kill switch. So number one, the automakers are actually suing on that rule because it's actually not practicable. You can't, the standards which NHTSA set are not functional. They didn't listen to us about about a kill switch because think about this. Again, I like to race a little bit too. And I go take my vehicle to the local track to race it. And I'm on an oval and somebody cuts in front of me. Well, there's automatic, if there's a AEB, it's going to stop. And that's dangerous.
I know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Counterintuitive. And so the fact is that there's no ability to even switch. Like, even in today's, like my sports car, you've got normal driving people's, thing. And then you can put it on a sports system. Basically, it's going to eliminate the ability to utilize your street vehicle for other purposes in safe environments. So like racing. So it'll also really impact our grassroots racing community.
Yeah. I had one of these really frustrating situations recently. Actually, I was on the West Coast when we got this huge snowstorm. And when I tried to convince my wife to let me take the Sequoia to the airport. I did not win that battle. And so I drove the Tesla to the airport. And when they plowed at Dulles, they plowed my car in. In like
that's why you take a Jeep.
feet of snow. So I spent 2 hours digging it all out. But then when you put it in the slip start mode, it still doesn't really let you just give it the beans. And I'm like, look, I'm from Minnesota. I know what I'm doing.
Exactly.
Just let me slam on the gas and I will get out of here.
Yeah.
And it will not. And there's no way to turn it off. And so it took me 40 minutes of rocking back and forth to be able to get it out.
Yeah.
Also alternative scenario, you put 1,000 pounds of cinder blocks in the back of your car. And I did this recently. We made a fire pit. But it when I was braking coming up to the entrance to my neighborhood, it takes twice as much time to stop.
Yeah.
It's not even just, are you going to do modifications on the thing, but are you going to be carrying a lot of, heavy materials or whatever?
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. So
I should be able to drive the car how I want.
Well, look, and we've done consumer research on this. And the fact is Americans do believe that your car is your property and you can do with it what you wish.
Yeah.
The caveat is that they do believe that you should do it safely. And it's not about you being safe in your own car. It's make sure that the guy beside you is that you don't hurt me as you're screwing around.
Yeah.
And I think our industry certainly accepts that. We accept that piece of it and we do want to modify safely, but we have to start to account for this technology and how that interacts with customization because, look, I take my vehicles to a builder actually in Sterling, he knows the stuff. Plus I have my youngest car, if you will, that is modified is 2021. So I don't have to worry about a lot of these systems. But, say you like to do stuff in your own garage or, modify stuff yourself. You want to put your own wheels on, or you want to lift your vehicle, or you want to put bigger tires on. You may not know this. And so having the ability to A, understand it, B, know that the product that you're buying and installing does actually work with this vehicle in that configuration. These are important things. And we're trying to get out ahead of where this is going so that we don't have a regulatory regime that is completely unworkable and is going to negatively impact not only our industry, but also the consumers that wish to modify their vehicles.
Yeah. So what is it that you hope the government will do to resolve this?
So right now we have legislation led by Representative or Congresswoman Harshberger, as well as a number of co-sponsors, that essentially starts to set the guidelines and instructs NHTSA to start to examine this technology, bring the stakeholders to the table, meaning DOEs as well as us, to start to set and define the guidelines for how these systems interact with the aftermarket. Because again, NHTSA never had to think about us much before because everything was mechanical. If you lifted, you lifted. If you lowered, you lowered. It was all mechanical. Now we're in technology. And so it really starts to set a directive to NHTSA to start to understand and develop the guidelines around modification and what we need from the OEs and what is expected of the aftermarket. And the way I kind of always describe it is we want to define a box. We're not talking about 6-inch lifts with 40-inch tires and so forth, some of the extreme stuff that you see, because you don't really see a lot of that on the roads. Most people do, 2 to 3.5-inch lift, probably a 35 tire, maybe 37s. So, we're not talking about the, millions and millions and millions of different modification, things that you could create. Let's define a box, sort of saying, okay, if everybody wants to move sort of, if you will, 2 to 3 inches up, 2 to 3 inches down, 2 to 3 inches left or right. All right, let's define a box so that we can understand the calibrations of these safety systems so everything can sort of work together. Because we do know that there are products out in the marketplace today where the OE knows what the modification opportunities are. There are OEs that are doing aftermarket installations after they come off the assembly line. I'm going to say the General Assembly. You can tell them in state legislative mode, coming off the assembly line, but then doing dealer packages of upfits with a lot of our manufacturers. So we know that there's tolerances. We know that they can lift a certain amount. We know that they can, deal with certain size tires and all of that kind of stuff. Let's start to put that in writing and understand the guidelines so that, again, as the technology continues to advance, that we're kind of being considered alongside of it. So all systems can cooperate with each other.
So the way that this would work in practice, if you guys got everything that you wanted, would be, you go into a particular dealership, they do the modification and then calibrate everything. And then it's just all hunky dory.
I don't think it's actually just defined to the dealership. Dealerships are going to be, not every dealership does modifications or whatever the case is. But if you want to take it to your builder and so forth, so you take your Jeep in, you take your truck in and say, all right, I want to lift it. I want to put a bigger tire. The independent operator will be like, okay, well, for your vehicle, we know all your systems will still work properly at this kind of lift, this kind of tire, and so forth. So
right.
I think knowledge is really the most important part of this. And this also extends even into the collision industry, quite frankly. Because they're struggling, the independent collision folks are struggling too with knowing what this information is when they have to do a post collision repair. And a lot of them are modifiers too. So I think, when you have an installer, and especially a responsible installer, so they know what will work on your system, then that helps inform you as a consumer as to, okay, this is where the box you should stay in. Now, if you choose as the consumer to be outside the box, that's your choice.
Yeah.
But that's your liability to accept. And so essentially that's sort of the outcome that we want, is that we want everybody to be informed as to what is possible, what is safe, and then for everybody to be able to make the choices that they want to make.
Yeah, that's great. I want to talk about the tariff stuff for a second.
Yeah.
my general conception, talking to a lot of guys who run small to medium-sized businesses, some of whom are doing all their manufacturing in the United States, some of whom are doing a mix, some of whom, are not doing a lot of manufacturing in the United States, is that for a lot of them, they, in an ideological sense, support the tariffs. They're going to suffer some short-term pain, but long-term, and by long-term, I mean like a couple years, not an insane amount of time. It's going to be good for specifically domestic manufacturers. What do the members of the association, like, what is that their read? Is it kind of a broad range? Like,
it's a pretty broad range. We actually did a survey of our members when sort of everything kind of became chaotic last winter. And we wanted to really kind of get a really deeper understanding as to the answer to that question, because we knew anecdotally, especially ones that we interact with more often, but we did a survey. And generally speaking, our industry understands the purpose of tariffs. They get it. They understand where the president's head is at in terms of the why. For some of them, the how, I think, has been the pain point. Again, some of our manufacturers, they're 100% American, don't care.
It's actually great for them.
Yeah, they're like, whatever, we're already doing it, so no real change. There is some issue with raw material pricing, but that we'll sort of set that aside for a second, because that's a different pain point that you really don't hear a lot about. And
I am going to come back to that, because I think that's important.
We'll park that for a second, but as it relates to the folks that are dealing with components, either they're manufacturing outside or doing partial manufacturing outside the country, or have components that they need, that's where the pain points are. So, for instance, people that are manufacturing outside of the U.S. and, look, a lot of our folks were leaving China already or had left China. So I think when then Vietnam and Thailand and everybody else got hit, it was like, wait, hold on. We went to the friendly guys because you told us to get out of China, but now you just slapped the friendly guys. So that was a bit of a, But where they're really challenged is that they need a bridge. They need a bridge of time so that if they want to bring their tooling back into the U.S. to start manufacturing here in the U.S. right now, that'd be subject to tariffs. So they already own the product, but just to bring it back into the U.S., they don't have there is no mechanism for reprieve. Same with the machines that they use. The tooling fits in to manufacture their products. And, my dad, I grew up in manufacturing. So, I literally saw this, a lot of these machines are made in like places like Germany and Japan and Korea and China. So in order to bring that manufacturing process back into the U.S., is there a reprieve that we can provide, especially small businesses, so that those machines are not tariffed? Because they're not built here. And the machine company is not going to come here to manufacture because there's not that much demand, right? There's not, there's only so much demand for CNC lathes throughout the globe. And so, for us, it's really for the members that are impacted by it, is there some kind of bridge of time where there is a tariff-free zone for, again, the machines and the tooling to be able to redomesticate that so that they can, in fact, bring their manufacturing into the U.S. So I think that's the crux point, because, 95% of our members are small businesses. So $5 million and less in revenue. When you think about, there's one manufacturer in particular, he did the math in terms of if he, I think is bringing the machine he'd need to buy. I think it's available ones in Germany. There's a company in China. But at the time when we talked, when everything was going on, and this was when whatever the tariff was on China, so it's a $600,000 machine. So now that's a $1.2 million machine. And so now to have to pay basically double the price in tariffs to bring the machine back, or to buy the machine and bring it to the US, that's a lot of money. And then to also have to pay for a tariff on his tooling to put in the machine to do the work. So that's the kind of stuff that, again, we're not talking about multi-billion-dollar companies. We're talking about companies that are,
a guy spending a fifth of his budget on
a fifth of his revenue, a fifth of his gross revenue.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So it's not even his budget. It's not even his net. That's his gross.
Well, yeah, I think there's a certain level to this, and I think this applies across a lot of issues, is whether we're going to take an incremental approach to something like this, or were just going to be totally absolute
Right.
overnight. And I think the amount of pain that domestic companies are going to experience differs between those two. Like my personal view is, I would be open to not having tariffs on the machines as long as you're bringing stuff back here, but still like tariffing the output of those machines, if they're coming from another country, right? Like that seems to make sense to me.
Perhaps. I mean, and everybody's needs are a little different, and
Sure.
that doesn't even address like there's some components that are just never going to be created here, and I'm going to use chips as one of the pieces. So we obviously have the chips bill that to bring the semiconductor industry into the U.S., provide the manufacturing incentives to bring that industry here, which is great and absolutely necessary. However, some of our folks, they don't need tomorrow's processor. They don't need that processing capacity. They're usually using third or fourth gen chips and technology because it's in like some of our lighting systems and all of that kind of stuff. So, a company that's investing $1 billion in creating a manufacturing plant here is not going to be producing third or fourth gen chips. They're going to be producing the latest and greatest technology. And so there's still going to be components that are going to be coming from overseas, obviously largely China, because it's the old stuff. And so, when you're dealing with that in volume, it does start to have an impact. So those are the kinds of things that, are kind of missed in the details as to what the impacts are for tariffs. Because again, no one's going to, you're just buying old technology because you don't need the latest. And obviously to manage the cost for your ultimate consumer, you don't need Intel's latest processing system.
Yeah. And I'm not super convinced. I mean, I don't know a ton about it, but I'm not super convinced that at least we haven't seen that it has really worked yet.
The tariffs, you mean? Or
no. Like the actual making all of that, like it's going to be a long process.
Right.
And I think it'll be some long period of time before we know whether or not that was actually ineffective.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's why, I think, again, from a manufacturing standpoint, sort of the aggressiveness of what, especially for us, we're highly impacted by the EPA and the regulations that come out of the EPA. The aggressive nature of this administration in pushing the deregulation has been helpful because piecemealing it is sort of like, well, do we, people are having to make business decisions on sort of milquetoast. Like, oh, is it happening versus like just sort of the way the past year where they've just kind of just deregged. So if you think about the reason why, and again, I came from a manufacturing family in Canada. So if you want to talk about regulations, I can go on and on for years on that. But why did manufacturing leave in the first place? Regulation and labor costs. So if you really want to bring back manufacturing, you have to dereg. You have to create pathways for manufacturing to exist. It doesn't mean we go and we start dumping chemicals into rivers and into the ground and everything like that happened obviously through the industrial age here in the US. We do not sit there and say, oh, we get rid of environmental law, but you have to create a path to compliance. And you can't just sort of enforce on the back end because you're not going to sit there and invest in manufacturing if you've got sort of the sword of Damocles constantly over your head about to not only kill the investment you just made, but also fine you out of existence. And so I think the aggressive nature of the dereg program that the administration has done has been good. Now it's how do we get it as set in stone as possible so that it creates that certainty? Because again, our businesses don't invest in presidential terms, right? They don't do 4-year increments. They're looking at their investments, and especially based on our tax code, they're looking at 10, 20-year investment life cycles and depreciation schedules and all of the stuff that comes in with that. So,
well, tell us.
I'm sorry, I just got really nerdy on tax policy. That's my background. So,
to kind of wrap all of this up, tell us about the SEMA Show that you and I met at. What it is. It is genuinely like the coolest conference I've ever been to. I think a lot of the guys in particular that listen to this podcast would love it. Maybe they could bring their bosses to come speak at it or something.
Absolutely.
But tell us about it.
Yeah. So the SEMA Show, I think we're actually considered the largest trade show in North America, probably one of the largest in the world. One of the unique things about it is actually it's business to business. It's B2B. It's not a consumer show. So not anybody can just get in. So the fact that we are still a B2B show and still the largest is pretty significant. And it is 1.2 million square feet of sheer automotive candy. And it's, and so, and it's all segments of our industry. I've obviously talked a lot about the off-road because that's my passion area. We talked a little bit about the performance industry. So everything you do in terms of improving the performance, but then you also have your collector cars and your classic vehicles. You have, we have a whole hall that is just wheels and tires. We have audio systems, like a whole half of a hall that's all audio systems, and then all the various accessories and so forth. So it's all the different parts of the automotive segment. We have the power sport. So, people don't think of the aftermarket in the power sport side, but you think about dirt bikes and UTVs and ATVs. That's all part of our industry because you need accessories in order to take those toys out to recreate, but they also get modified. So it's just it's a very large space. We take up every possible inch of the Las Vegas Convention Center as well, both inside and outside, to really showcase what our industry does. And if you really want to kind of get a feel for what American manufacturing looks like, because we're obviously are probably the most American made trade show out of sort of, if you will, our colleagues in the trade space. If you want to see American manufacturing at its finest, this is the place to be.
You guys had like a drift course outside this
Yeah.
year. I spent some time watching that. And then I remember when I was coming up to meet you and some of your colleagues for the first time, I walked by, there was that exhibit at the bottom of the stairs where it was the Honda S2000 from Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift.
Sun Kang's
bright orange. And I was like, dude, this rocks.
Yeah. So
awesome.
I think that was Sun Kang's car. So Sun Kang was a celebrity guest at the show this year. We have a number of folks.
Was he really?
Yeah.
I missed that?
You missed that.
Dude.
All right. You obviously weren't nice enough to Sarah and Will.
Yeah. Jeez.
So Sun was there, and if people like Fluffy, Jay Leno, who obviously everybody knows, he's a huge car guy. We had the head of the FIA, which is the sanctioning body over F1. Mohammed bin Sulayem is there. Yeah.
The Las Vegas GP was the week after.
I think they're 2 weeks afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah. So Mohammed,
because they were setting up for the street circuit while I was there.
Exactly. We're partners with them in the safety and mobility space. So they were there. We had supercar builders, hypercar builders. It's just America's finest on display.
Have you ever had the guys from Top Gear come to SEMA?
They may have been there.
We should make that happen.
I mean, if they,
that would rock.
I know if my show guys are like, of course we have Karen. I don't know.
Yeah.
Honestly, I tend to have a bit of a narrow focus when I'm at the show because, unfortunately, the first day of the show seems for the past couple of years has been on election day. So I've been a little focused on sort of outcomes there because that sort of defines our, what we're going to be doing after that. But we actually had a record number of lawmakers join us this year, mostly from the state level. Nearly 100 of them came to the show to meet folks from their districts, meet folks from their states, get to know each other, talk about policy and so forth. And over the years, we've had a number of federal lawmakers. We actually had Administrator Lee Zeldin stop by at the start of the show this year to say hello and gave him a little award because we appreciate everything he's been doing on the public-private partnerships when it comes to what he's doing over at the EPA. So we always have, you never know who might be walking around the SEMA show.
And what are the dates this year? It's November.
It is the first, if you will, the first full week of November. So it starts on election day and goes through Friday.
Okay.
So even if your boss is running for re-election this year and is in a tough race, you can come celebrate with us on Wednesday or Thursday and still make a trip out.
There you go. Well, that's great. Where can people find out more about the work that SEMA is doing and find out all the information about the show?
Sure. So everything you can find at SEMA.org, SEMA.org. Anything advocacy, there's a little tab at the top that says advocacy. So that's where all of our issues are. And then if you want to get straight to the show, you can go to semashow.com. That's the clearinghouse of where people go and register for the show and so forth. But quite frankly, if you're interested and want to talk more either about the show, about some of the policies that we're working on, our contact information is on the SEMA.org advocacy page, and you can reach us pretty easily.
Great. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on Moment of Truth and talking about cars with me for
Absolutely.
an
This
hour.
is fun. This is so much fun.
Yeah,
this is so
it's
much
great.
fun. Thank you so much for having me. You guys do great work and appreciate all that you guys do.
Of course. Thank you.
And come play with us in Vegas again.
Yes, I'd love to do that. I'm very excited.
All right.
Thanks for tuning in to yet another fantastic episode of Moment of Truth. And thank you to Karen and SEMA for making the time to be able to be here to do this episode. They are a really cool organization. Like I said during the podcast, the SEMA Show is like the coolest conference I've ever been to. So this was definitely a blast to do, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you again for tuning in to another episode of Moment of Truth, and we will see you again next week. Moment of Truth is an American Moment podcast taped at the Conservative Partnership Campus Studios and is produced by Jake Mercier and Hunter Smith, with original graphics and title cards by Jared Cummings. Our intro song is A Minor Struggle by Ryan Serenich, and our website is americanmoment.org.